Hey folks, back again with another vlog. This is Steven Universe Season 2, Episodes 23 and 4 or 21 and 2? I'm no longer sure. I don't know anymore. It's 20-something. Anyway, this is Back to the Barn and Too Far. And it seems, so far at least, I was right. They're going to do a series of episodes involving Peridot's relationship to one of the crystal gems in each one. So we start off with her and Pearl. And yeah, the other connecting theme between these two is that Peridot's a bigot. She is severely prejudiced against... I mean, we already kind of got hints of that, but she is very obviously severely prejudiced against gems based on their gem, what type of gem they are, and seems to take this as being completely normal, which, you know, is telling us a lot about gem society. It's very stratified. Pun intended. It's almost, I'm not even almost, it's basically a caste system. Gems are born into specific roles based on what type of gem they are. Pearls, for example, are apparently a very low-class servitor role that's used... The way Peridot described it was kind of, they're displayed as a status symbol, and they're just kind of gophers. That makes a lot of sense, actually, because pearls aren't really gems. They're solidified oyster mucus. So I'm guessing that pearls are produced by a different process than the other gems, and that they are sort of the gem equivalent of androids. Because the way gems come into being is so different from humans, it's a little hard to draw the line between, like, what's a natural gem versus an artificial gem, because there seems to be a significant amount of technology involved either way. But then again, I mean, you could say the same of, you know, humans at this point. There's a lot of technology involved in our reproductive process, simply, you know, in terms of, you know, ultrasounds and epidurals and the whole hospital apparatus in which most people in first world nations give birth. So it kind of makes sense. You know, for an outside observer, it would be difficult to draw the line. Even though for us, it would be really easy to say, okay, these are naturally, are naturally produced humans. You know, even test tube babies are naturally produced, in the sense of growing in a womb from a fertilized egg. Clones would be on this side, but like Data from Star Trek is clearly an artificial human. An artificial person. I think it's likely that the same distinction, that it's a little less clear for us until we get more information about the gems, but that kind of the same distinction is going with Pearl and the other gems, which fills in a lot of her anxieties, her feelings of low self-worth, her unique abilities that aren't shared by the other gems, like hologram projection, her ability to interface with technology. She sticks her hand into things and is able to just interface with gem technology. All of that makes a lot more sense if she's the gem equivalent of an android. In an episode that's about building giant robots, the reveal that Pearl is essentially a gem robot, like subtle reveal of it, or hint at it, that fits. Most of the episode, though, is really dedicated to kind of a very fun competition between Pearl and Peridot. There's a point to it, but it's fun. The various silly contests they have to put their giant robots through are great. The giant robot designs are both great and very in character. Pearl's little declaration of, mine's taller, I win. Great. There are two visual gags during the competition that I loved. One was when they both crash into the tree, and then it cuts to the scoreboard, and Steven has given the tree that point. I loved that, and I also started thinking about how if it were a slightly wackier show, slightly more toward the humor side of the adventure cartoon versus comedy cartoon kind of spectrum, though obviously that's something of a false binary, but the spectrum of which you've got Batman the Animated Series at one end and Uncle Grandpa at the other, or Looney Tunes or whatever. That if it were a little more toward the Looney Tunes side, the episode could very well have ended with the tree in charge. The other gag I really liked was when they both do the paintings, and Steven just writes subjective across the whole scoreboard. That was very cute. But of course it ends with a tie, which I honestly am wondering if Steven most of the events were things where it was really obvious in advance who was going to win. There were only a couple jumping where it wasn't obvious which of the two would be better at it. I'm actually honestly wondering if between that and the fact that he was the judge, Steven manufactured things, deliberately chose the events so that they would tie. I don't know if Steven is that devious, but if he is, that's exactly the kind of thing he would try to do. I don't think he is that devious, though. I think it's just that's how the episode plot went. And then, they fight, and Peridot has to grudgingly admit that she, needs to work together with this person that she looks down upon. It's a baby step toward being less of a bigot, and as we see in the next episode, she still hasn't quite wrapped her mind around the idea that these rigid hierarchies that she's used to, that this kind of stratification of society is not acceptable to the gems, the crystal gems. And that's kind of, the fact that she's still got to work on it is kind of made clear at the end, where she says something about, what about the rules? I won. Which, first of all, isn't actually true. They tied, and then she demanded an extra fighting match that wasn't part of the contest, and therefore doesn't count toward it. But, the thing about people who are really dedicated to living a life completely structured according to rigid rules is somehow those rigid rules always justify what they wanted. There's a line of something I read years ago where some character was ranting about how they were, divinely ordained to do whatever it was, and this was the will of God and all this, and somebody else just said, you're so lucky that your God always just happens to want everything you do. That's kind of, Peridot is authoritarian but opportunistic. She is, she uses authoritarian ideas to justify what she wants. But as Garnet says, in response to, what about the rules? As Garnet says, who cares? This is Earth. This isn't the Gem homeworld. This is, a place of greater freedom. Which, being someone who lives on Earth could be better. Earth could do with, some more rules about some things and a lot fewer rules about other things. But still better than what we've seen at the Gem homeworld and Gem Society. So I'll grant Garnet that. And then, second episode, I actually thought initially it was going to be about Peridot's anti-fusion attitude and be an episode about her and Garnet. And it started off like a very strong one. I loved her whole, she comes up and she's like, your permanent fusion status makes me uncomfortable. And we cut to her tied up in the yard. Nice payback on that thing Pearl was wondering about a couple episodes ago. Payback, payoff. And Garnet being like, letting her have free reign made me uncomfortable. And, I could not ask for a more perfect representation of the paradox of tolerance to kids. If you're not familiar, this is a long-established thing in political science. It's been around for decades. So when people say, you have to tolerate my intolerance or you're being intolerant, they're actually, that has already been answered decades ago, which is this concept of the paradox of tolerance, which is the idea that if you tolerate all behavior, anything anyone does is totally okay, the result is that intolerant people will abuse the people they're intolerant of, while no one else will do anything about it because all behavior is tolerated, including intolerant behavior. And the net result is a society that is not very tolerant, because the intolerant people can bully everyone else as much as they want. A society that is less perfectly universally tolerant, one which is intolerant toward intolerant behavior, ends up having more real degrees of freedom for each individual, more range of behavior that is in practice tolerated, because the intolerant can't, the intolerant are prevented from picking on people. So that actually ends up being the maximally tolerant society. You can't achieve perfect tolerance. The maximally tolerant society is one in which everything is tolerated except intolerance. Obviously, even that is a little bit too far, because there's things that aren't precisely intolerant, but still can't really be tolerated in a healthy society, like killing anyone who annoys you. Not really a thing that works if society tolerates that behavior. But with a few exceptions like that, like the maximally tolerant society is one where people like Peridot get chained to the fence. Your existence makes me uncomfortable is not a legitimate complaint. If someone's existence makes you uncomfortable, well, that's your problem. Period. End of story. It's behavior that's a different story. People whose behavior is intolerable, that you can do something about. But the simple fact, quite simply, she's objecting to the gay couple holding hands in public and saying that this makes me uncomfortable. Well, too damn bad for you, because that's a you problem. So good on the show for depicting that, and having exactly the correct response to it. Zero sympathy, zero, we should understand where she's coming from. No, fuck that. Just chain her to the fence until she learns her lesson. But the bulk of the episode was actually about Peridot and Amethyst. So I'm hoping that the next episode will be more directly addressing the Peridot and Garnet thing. But Peridot and Amethyst was interesting. So apparently Amethyst is a type of quartz, which I looked it up and it is. Interestingly, jasper is also a type of quartz, which I guess makes sense. So quartzes are the big warrior gems. Which explains why rose quartz was gigantic, I suppose. It's actually interesting to me because, like I was saying in just like the last vlog, Peridot recognized Stephen as a quartz, which led me to believe that quartzes are protectors and healers. But now it turns out that they're actually warriors. But, you know, it occurs to me that from Peridot's perspective, Stephen is like an unstoppable warrior. Because he came onto the ship, walked through force fields, grabbed the weapon she tried to hit him with, and just took it. Like she had just, you know, like she had just shot him and the bullets had spanged off of him. That was effectively like what it was like from her perspective. Or like she stabbed him and he just like took the knife away and tossed it aside. Like, so from her perspective, it makes sense that she would see him as like this powerful warrior. From our perspective, that's nonsense. And she quickly finds that actually his only thing he really can do is, as she found out last episode, is create a shield. Or the episode I was talking about last vlog. But apparently Amethyst is also quote-unquote supposed to be a warrior. And to Peridot, being anything other than what you were quote-unquote supposed to be, other than like what your caste is being defective. You know, it's a good contrast to the Pearl episode, because with the Pearl episode, it was Peridot sees Pearl as trying to rise above her station, and she's very, you know, she rejects that. She thinks Pearl needs to be put in her place, and learns otherwise. And comes to recognize that Pearl is actually an extraordinary Pearl, as Steve points out. You know, she's obviously, if Peridot's opinions of pearls are true, which I suspect that certainly might be what it looks like, but I suspect that pearls in general have a lot of unfulfilled potential, as tends to be something that happens in any caste system. I think, you know, as Stephen points out, if what she says is true, then Pearl is an extraordinary Pearl, not a common Pearl. And if what she thinks isn't true, then what she thinks isn't true, and she shouldn't be basing her actions and attitudes off of it. So he actually kind of nails Peridot with the logic there. Which, logic not exactly being Stephen's strongest suit. Well done, kid. Well done, kiddo. You know, I say that, but he's actually pretty wise for, like, an 11-year-old or whatever he is. What else? Right, getting back to the Amethyst thing. The contrast is Amethyst, from Peridot's perspective, is beneath what she should be. She's not living up to her potential as a quartz. She should be this enormous, powerful warrior, and she's sort of small and round, and probably, from what we've seen, the least effective fighter of the three. Pearl is the precision scalpel, Garnet is the most powerful, Amethyst tends to not be as effective. Because apparently she was in the ground too long. Apparently she came out hundreds of years afterwards. Which now leads me to suspect then that she never fought in the war, which I can't remember if we already knew that. But, either she never fought in the war or she was in it very late. Either way, interesting. It'd be nice to get a little more Amethyst backstory, I guess. But the main thing, the important thing, is that Amethyst, as is often the case, is insulted by these comments about her. Who wouldn't be? Being called defective. And Peridot doesn't even remotely understand it, but eventually comes to and gives an apology as best she can. And it's actually kind of a nice moment. She's slowly... I'm increasingly thinking that she's gonna be around for the long haul. Because she's really kind of becoming one of them. She's slowly merging into the team. She's slowly learning to adapt and be part of the team and understand how they work and let go of some of her old attitudes. So I don't know. Maybe? I'm assuming that the season finale will be the cluster. And then maybe Peridot chooses to stick around afterwards, or maybe they've defeated the cluster, but she has nowhere else to go. She still can't go back to her homeworld. She has no way of getting there, so maybe she just stays with them. I don't know. It would definitely be a major shift to the dynamic, but season 3 is not a bad time in a show's life to toss in some major shifts to the dynamic, because there's a tendency for things to be getting a little too settled after a couple seasons. I don't know. I could be entirely wrong. We'll see. Show continues to be a blast. I'm going to go watch more right now. Bye!